Israel is getting what it wants. The Iranian regime is starting to show signs of weakness and is asking Netanyahu to stop the attacks and come to the negotiating table. Yes, you heard correctly.
A battered Iran signals it wants to de-escalate hostilities with Israel and negotiate. Messages passed by Tehran through intermediaries seek a return to talks if the US stays out of the fight.
That said, this might be more of a mirage than anything real. Why do I say that? Well, on one hand, Israel and Iran are threatening each other's major cities. And on the other hand, the United States has deployed the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier to the Middle East from the South China Sea. It's a nuclear-powered carrier with capacity for over 60 aircraft and 5,000 personnel. But there's more. Washington has also sent around 30 aerial refueling tankers eastward toward Europe. It's a move with no recent precedent, and it's raising all kinds of alarms, especially because no one really knows what their final destination is. Given all this, at this point, we can't even rule out the possibility that the US might somehow get involved in Israel's operation if the conflict escalates. So on the surface, it looks like the Ayatollah regime has shifted from punishment mode to survival mode. But watch out, when regimes like this feel cornered, that's often when they become the most dangerous. In fact, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is now calling for the evacuation of Tel Aviv in the face of what appears to be a major escalation in the war. Israel strikes on Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile systems, which we'll talk about in a moment, and its military and political leadership have been devastating, probably much more than Tehran ever expected. At this point, it seems like their main concern is preventing the regime from collapsing, and even that is far from guaranteed. In fact, right after Iran called for dialogue, Israel bombed the headquarters of Iran's state television while the anchor was live on air. It looks like the Israelis are sticking to their plan and going all in, right into the heart of Tehran. And not just against military targets, as you've seen, but also against the regime's entire propaganda machine, including state-run television. This VisualPolitik community is the response to last night's bloody Iranian missile attack. The Ayatollah regime launched a fresh wave of missiles in retaliation for Israel's strikes on its nuclear and ballistic facilities. At this time, the outcome was deadly. At least 8 people killed and dozens injured, particularly in the Tel Aviv metro area and in Haifa.
Iranian strikes killed at least 8 in Israel as conflict enters 4th day.
In Haifa, Iranian forces managed to hit a power station near the port, also damaging part of the city's electrical grid. How did they do it? With the same strategy we explained here on VisualPolitik: saturation attacks. Every passing day, Israel's air defenses are under more and more strain, and now we're starting to see the consequences. More Iranian missiles are getting through, even though the ballistic salvos are getting smaller. What's more, many of these attacks are indiscriminate. Iranian missiles are landing in residential areas with no military targets nearby. In fact, estimates say that around 20 Israelis have been killed by Iranian strikes since the beginning of this offensive. By the way, 2 of them were inside a shelter. So Tehran's retaliation isn't just aimed at critical infrastructure, it's hitting anyone. If it weren't for Israel's exceptional air defenses, the situation would be catastrophic. And that's exactly what has led Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, to issue the following warning.
The arrogant dictator of Tehran has become a scared murderer who fires at Israel's civilian home front in order to deter the IDF from continuing to carry out attacks that are destroying his capabilities. The residents of Tehran will pay the price, and soon.
For the first time in the 4 days since this direct war began, an Israeli official appears to be issuing a direct threat to the residents of Tehran. In fact, as you saw at the beginning of this video, this isn't just a warning. They've already moved into action. Up until now, Israeli threats were aimed solely at the regime. The strikes had been focused on military and energy infrastructure, as well as the homes of regime officials and nuclear scientists. But in recent hours, Katz has clarified his statement. He wasn't referring to targeting civilians directly, but warning that they would pay the price for the Ayatollah regime's attacks by being forced to leave their homes and jobs. In other words, something along the lines of, Ayatollahs, we warned you. If you touch our civilians, we'll turn Tehran to ashes. We said it, and we'll follow through. The goal behind this warning appears to be to force a mass evacuation of the capital, leaving behind regime loyalists, officials, and military targets exposed to direct urban strikes. And indeed, since yesterday, convoys of cars fleeing the Iranian capital have multiplied. Tehran is currently experiencing a full-scale exodus as people rush to escape what's expected to become the epicenter of the next wave of major attacks. Here's the thing. Israel has claimed it has full control over the airspace above Iran's capital and much of the country. They can basically fly freely from Israeli territory all the way to Tehran or Isfahan, and from there launch missiles from fighter jets with several hundred kilometers of additional range.
IDF claims full control of Tehran's airspace as fresh strikes reported deep inside Iran.
In other words, most of Iran is already within Netanyahu's reach in less than a week. And that's crucial for understanding headlines like this one.
Israel destroyed a third of Iran's ballistic missile launchers, IDF says.
According to Israeli armed forces, Iran has already lost a third of its ballistic capabilities in just 4 days. That's around 120 launchers, and that's massive. Not only is it massive, it's also key to understanding what might happen in the coming days. So here's the deal. The Islamic Republic only managed to launch about half the missiles it had planned to fire during the early hours of yesterday. And that's exactly what Israel is focusing on right now. The IDF's mission is no longer primarily to hit Iran's nuclear research and production sites. They've already struck facilities in Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow, some with only limited damage for now. Now the main objective is to stop Tehran's retaliation at all costs. And that retaliation can only come in 2 forms: drones or ballistic missiles. The issue with drones is that they are slow. They take hours to reach Israeli territory, and by the time they get there, the Air Force and defense systems have already shot them down. So the Ayatollahs are left with one real option to punish Israel: missiles. And that's exactly what they are using. If Jerusalem manages to destroy not just a third, but the vast majority of Iran's ballistic capabilities, the regime will be completely out of the game. No way to strike back. Totally exposed. And that's when Israel can do whatever it wants, without fear of retaliation, including, if they choose to, sending Ayatollah Khamenei straight to paradise. A goal that, for now, and somewhat ironically, seems to be held back by none other than Trump. Take a look.
Trump vetoed Israeli plan to kill Iran's supreme leader, U.S. officials say. Have the Iranians killed an American yet? No, until they do, we're not even talking about going after the political leadership.
It seems that at the 11th hour, the Ayatollahs have found themselves a guardian angel in Washington. Even so, one thing is very clear, because they've proven it time and time again. The Israelis will do whatever they want. They're just waiting for the right moment. And that moment could come once Iran's ballistic capabilities are severely weakened. That, as we've been saying, is crucial to what happens next. That's why, in this video, we're asking a couple of critical questions. At this point in time, how is Iran still managing to strike Israel with missiles, despite the air raids? Can that strategy hold out much longer, or is Tehran about to be completely exposed? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down right now.
Iran's only card.
Missiles are all Iran has left. As we've just explained, this is the only card Khamenei's regime still has to play, and it's a heavily damaged one. But here's the thing, this wild card won't be so easy to wipe out completely, not as easy as it might seem. Yet Israel has already taken out about 120 launchers, roughly a third of Iran's capacity, but chances are most of those were on the surface or stationed at visible missile bases, ready to fire. However, a significant portion of Tehran's ballistic arsenal is hidden, and that's going to be crucial in the coming days. According to Israeli sources, Iran started this conflict with roughly 2,000 ballistic missiles of varying ranges and warhead types. That's about 1,000 fewer than US intelligence estimated just a few months ago, after a series of Israeli strikes that seem to have reduced their stockpile. Now, why are we telling you this? For 2 main reasons. Firstly, because Iran is burning through a few hundred missiles a day in an attempt to punish Israel. At that pace, the Ayatollahs could run out of missiles in under a month, without the IDF needing to launch any new major campaigns. But here's the catch. Israel can't afford to let this drag on, while Iranian missiles continue to hit its cities. Very few of them get past interceptors, but as we've shown, some do. Which means there's no choice. They have to go after them. So what's the problem? Well, Iran's Revolutionary Guard and its regular military have invested heavily in building a missile arsenal that's as difficult to eliminate as possible with a single attack or military campaign. And to pull that off, they've implemented several overlapping strategies. The first, a layered air defense system.
Iran has a large number of air defense systems, including domestically made platforms, systems built in Asia, and Russian S-300 batteries. Until recently, these systems were believed to form a protective shield against airstrikes. But as we've seen, the Israelis have managed to neutralize them, both through direct attacks and internal sabotage. That means Tehran's ballistic systems are now exposed, relying only on their last layer of protection, the infrastructure where they're stored and operated.
But to really understand this, we first need to talk a bit about Iran's missile systems. You see, the Ayatollahs have a multi-layered ballistic launch system. What does that mean? It means their military doctrine includes 3 different types of ballistic launchers: fixed, mobile, and underground systems. So what are fixed launchers? These are stationary surface-based sites, and as such, they're much easier to monitor and target. All it takes is real-time satellite imagery or spy plane flyovers to locate them and figure out how to neutralize them. And while we don't know for sure what kinds of systems Israel has taken out so far, it's very likely that most of them were fixed launchers, along with a few mobile ones spotted above ground. So what exactly are mobile launchers? Well, they look something like what you're seeing on screen right now. Systems like the Shahab 3 can emerge from hiding with their missiles already loaded, fire from somewhere in the desert, and then quickly relocate to avoid detection. And while this tactic makes it extremely difficult to track and destroy these launchers, keep in mind, we told you that the Israelis have gained control over much of Iran's airspace. That has given them a key advantage. They've been able to assign dozens of fighter jets solely to monitor the movement of mobile launchers, and once they're spotted, strike them before they can vanish again. However, the real challenge, the hardest part, comes with the last category we mentioned, the underground systems. It's well known that Iran has several massive underground complexes that allow them to fully operate their missile systems. And when I say fully, I mean they can transport, load, refuel, and even launch the missiles all underground, completely hidden from view. These are operations Iran can carry out without easily being detected by satellites or reconnaissance flights. And that's going to be one of the biggest operational challenges in the coming days. And here's the thing, for years, Iran has gone out of its way to make sure its enemies know it has this capability. In fact, they've often released photos and videos of some of these underground facilities as a way to deter potential attacks from Israel or Gulf countries. But what's the catch? Well, even though these missile mega complexes, modeled by the way after North Korea's, are harder to strike, they're not invincible. Take a look.
IAF destroys Iranian missile base used in Tehran propaganda clips. IAF fighter jets struck an underground missile storage facility in western Iran on Saturday morning. The jets struck the site, containing surface-to-surface missiles and cruise missiles, after receiving guidance from the Intelligence Directorate.
According to Israeli sources, at least one of these underground ballistic bases has already been destroyed. The problem is, successfully pulling that off requires on-the-ground intelligence, something far harder to obtain than satellite imagery. But what that strike tells us is that even these fortified facilities aren't invincible, and if Netanyahu's military campaign continues, Israel might eventually succeed in disabling Tehran's ballistic capabilities altogether. Now here's a question. What if I told you that there's a more effective way to take the Ayatollah's regime out of the game? Yes, even more effective than destroying their missiles. Any guesses? The answer lies in their chain of command. Here's the thing, one of Iran's biggest weaknesses is that its chain of command is extremely centralized and concentrated in very few hands. It's a truly critical vulnerability. According to Israeli intelligence, field commanders don't have the authority to launch attacks independently, even in emergencies like this one. They have to coordinate with their superiors, who are based far from the launch sites, and request authorization that outlines exactly how the attack should be carried out. So what's the problem? Well, I'm sure many of you have already guessed it. In recent days, Israel has been selectively eliminating a number of high-ranking Iranian officials, both civilian and military. And when I say selectively, I mean it. Jerusalem had already identified in advance exactly who to take out in order to cause the greatest possible disruption to Iran's command structure. In fact, that's what allowed them to go, in just 24 hours, from covert operations inside Iran to open airstrikes, to hitting missile bases and storage sites, and then to striking military industrial centers. What's more, Israeli analysts believe that the reason Iran's air defenses fell so quickly and haven't been restored has less to do with the number of batteries destroyed and more to do with a breakdown in military leadership.
The Iranians are struggling to launch the kinds of massive salvos we saw last year. They are hampered by strikes on their commanders, storage facilities, and launch infrastructure, as well as disrupted command and control systems.
So the Israelis know this is a now or never moment. The regime is extremely weak, with limited effective weaponry and a power vacuum at the top. That's why Israeli intelligence is going all in, hunting down the remaining ballistic missile launchers across Iran like there's no tomorrow. Right now, they're even using manned fighter jets to identify and strike launchers in real time. Those jets are on standby to react instantly before targets relocate or vanish. And that includes trying to pinpoint all the underground bases as well. And here's the thing, Israel doesn't even need to destroy all of Iran's ballistic systems to gain operational freedom and impunity. It would be enough to knock out just enough of them, so Iran can no longer launch large salvos, and so that whatever few missiles they do fire can be intercepted without risking saturation. Something that, as we explained at the beginning of this video, has not happened yet. But when it does, Tehran won't even be able to retaliate against anything Jerusalem does from that point on. And that's when anything could happen. Ayatollah Khamenei, more top military and political leaders. We obviously don't know what will come next, but as you can see here on VisualPolitik, we're closely monitoring every development. And naturally, we'll be here to keep you informed. But until that moment arrives, now it's your turn. Do you think Israel will succeed in fully neutralizing Iran's ballistic capabilities? Do you believe they'd go so far as to eliminate Ayatollah Khamenei once that happens? What could unfold if they do? Could it spark a regime change from within? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And before you go, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't done so already. It's free and it really helps us out a ton. As always, thank you so much for being there. Take care. I'll see you next time.